Everyone dies. It doesn't matter if you're rich, poor, saint, criminal, famous or anonymous. Death knocks on everyone's door. But what happens after the heart stops beating? Does everything turn into darkness and silence? Or does consciousness, the thing that makes you you, continue to exist somewhere else? This is humanity's oldest, deepest, and most universal question. And the most incredible part, nearly every culture on every continent in every era answers in similar ways. They speak of tunnels of light, beings of light, judgments, heavenly realms, reincarnations, souls returning to visit the living. Is this coincidence? Collective fantasy? Or is there something real behind it all? Something modern science is beginning to confirm, and that religions have tried to control, hide, or oversimplify. Because the truth is, the sacred texts you know, especially the Bible, don't tell the whole story. Many books that described what happens after death were banned, burned, or buried by the church in the early centuries of Christianity. Texts like the Gospel of Peter, where Jesus rises from the tomb accompanied by two giant angels whose heads touch the clouds, or the Apocalypse of Paul, where he is taken to heaven and sees souls punished in lakes of fire and others resting in golden gardens. These texts aren't fiction. They're ancient records written by people who swore they had real visions and were deemed too dangerous to survive. Why? Because they showed that death is not the end, and if death isn't the end, then the life we live now carries far more weight than we imagine. But it's not just religious texts pointing to something beyond death. Science is full of mysteries too. Doctors like Raymond Moody in the 1970s began documenting cases of people who died clinically, heart stopped, brain inactive, and came back. And what did they report? The same thing. Deep peace, floating outside the body, tunnel of light, meeting loved ones, life review in seconds. These experiences, called NDEs, near-death experiences, have been recorded in over 15 million people worldwide, and they're not hallucinations. Studies from the University of Michigan showed that in rats, the brain enters a state of hyperconsciousness minutes after death, with brain activity even higher than in life. In humans, there are documented cases of patients describing exact details of operating rooms while they were dead, details they couldn't possibly know. Young children with no exposure to religion describe the beautiful place I was before I was born. Isolated indigenous tribes with no contact with the West tell stories identical to those of patients in European hospitals. Is all this coincidence? Or are we facing a universal truth, one that was suppressed, distorted, but never destroyed? And if you feel this changes everything you thought about life, you're right. Because if consciousness survives death, then nothing we do here is insignificant. Every act, every word, every choice echoes beyond the grave. And that's why religions, empires, and power systems have always tried to control the narrative about what comes next. Because whoever controls the fear of death controls people's lives. But now you have access to what was hidden. In this journey, we'll explore 18 different visions of what happens after death. Christian, Jewish, Islamic, Hindu, Buddhist, Spiritist, Egyptian, African, Gnostic, atheist, philosophical, scientific. We'll reveal what was cut from the Bible. We'll show the secret rituals that prepare the soul for the final journey. We'll uncover the studies science doesn't want you to know. And at the climax, we'll piece it all together and you will see death is not the end. It's the greatest transition you'll ever experience. And what's on the other side is more real than this world. If this makes you think, if it makes you question, if it makes you want to dig deeper, then stay with us, because what we're about to reveal isn't in school books. It's in secret archives, in burned manuscripts, in the memories of those who came back. And if you've made it this far, it's because deep down someone already knows death is not the end. It's just the next chapter. Save this video, share it with those you love. Subscribe, because this journey is for those unafraid to face the greatest mystery of the universe. Ever since the first human buried another with flowers, tools, and food beside the body, humanity has never been able to ignore the question, what happens after death? It's not religion, not dogma, it's instinct, ancestral memory, something encoded in our spiritual DNA. Archaeologists found, in Shanidar Cave in Iraq, a burial over 60,000 years old, a body covered with wildflowers, carefully chosen, some with medicinal and psychoactive properties. This was no accident. It was ritual, message, the first material proof that, from the beginning, humans believed death was not the end, and that the dead needed something for the journey ahead. And that belief never disappeared. It only transformed. From cave shamans to laboratory neuroscientists, everyone in some way has tried to answer the same question. And the most fascinating part, the more science advances, the closer it gets to what the ancients already knew. In 2022, researchers from the University of Southampton published a study with over 2,000 cardiac arrest patients. Of those, 40% who were resuscitated reported clear consciousness during the time they were clinically dead. Some described exact details of what was happening around them, while their brains showed no activity. One man, 57 years old, described the exact position of the doctors, the tools used, even their conversation, all while his heart had been stopped for over 3 minutes. This is not hallucination, it's scientific data, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. But why then have most religions and power systems tried to simplify, control, or even deny this reality? Because whoever controls the narrative about death controls people's lives. If you believe you go to heaven only if you obey certain rules, you submit. If you believe you'll reincarnate as an insect if you fail in this life, you behave. If you believe you turn to dust and vanish, you give up searching for meaning. And that's why ancient texts describing death as a complex journey, full of stages, choices, realms, and guides, were banned. The Egyptian Book of the Dead, for example, wasn't a prayer book. It was a soul survival manual. It taught the deceased how to navigate the corridors of the Duat, face gods who tested their truth, recite magical formulas to open portals, transform into light when needed. This knowledge was so powerful that only pharaohs and high priests had access. Over time, it was reduced to pagan superstition. But the rituals survived, hidden in African oral traditions, Jewish Kabbalah, Kardecist spiritism. And today, science is rediscovering what the ancients already knew. Consciousness does not depend on the brain. It uses the brain like a radio uses electricity to tune into a station. When the radio breaks, the station keeps broadcasting. And that's what NDEs show. Consciousness remains active, lucid, coherent, even when the brain is off. But there's something even deeper and more dangerous. Because if consciousness survives death, then it existed before life. And that changes everything. Young children, between 2 and 5 years old, often speak of memories of past lives. And some describe details so specific that researchers like Dr. Ian Stevenson from the University of Virginia spent decades investigating and verifying real cases. A girl in Turkey described the house where she lived before, her husband's name, how she died, all confirmed by records and witnesses. A boy in the US described a World War II airplane factory where he worked, and the details were so precise that historians were stunned. This is not childish imagination, it's memory. And if the soul already existed before this body, then the life we live now is not an accident. It's a mission, a stage, a school. And whoever controls the narrative that you only live once is trying to keep you trapped in a cycle of fear, consumption, and obedience. Because if you knew you've lived before and will live again, you'd stop accepting what harms you. You'd stop postponing your dreams. You'd stop surrendering your power. And that's why this knowledge was buried. But now it's returning. Through science, through children, through near-death survivors, through you who feel deep down that there's more, much more. And if this makes you think, if it makes you question, if it makes you want to dig deeper, then stay with us, because what we're about to reveal isn't in school books. It's in secret archives, in burned manuscripts, in the memories of those who came back. And the next step is diving into the vision that shaped the West. What Christian tradition truly teaches about what comes after death, and what was erased so you never know the truth. Fear of death is not natural, it's manufactured, and it has been used with terrifying mastery by empires, religions, and power systems to control billions of people for thousands of years. Because when you fear death, you accept anything. Wars, absurd taxes, oppressive rules, corrupt leaders, soul-crushing jobs, destructive relationships. You obey, you stay silent, you postpone your dreams, you surrender your power. And that's exactly what early emperors and religious leaders realized. Whoever controls the fear of death controls everything. In ancient Rome, for example, Emperor Augustus turned his adoptive father, Julius Caesar, into Divus as a god after his death, not out of love, out of strategy. Because if the people believed the emperor became a god after death, they would obey him in life, fearing punishment in the afterlife. In Egypt, pharaohs weren't just kings, they were living gods. And their pyramids weren't tombs. They were ascension machines designed to launch the soul into the heavens. But only pharaohs had that right. The people, they died and turned to dust, or so they were told. And that lie, that only the powerful had access to the afterlife, was repeated for centuries, even today. Because if you believe you only go to heaven if you're good, obey, pay tithes, follow rules, pray the right way, you become hostage to whoever defines what good is. And who defines that? Those in power. But the truth hidden by ancient texts, is that death is not judgment, it's transition. And everyone, absolutely everyone, has the same right to cross that portal. It doesn't matter your religion, your money, your status. What matters is your consciousness, your choices, your alignment. And that SY texts like the Egyptian Book of the Dead were so dangerous. They taught that any soul, if it knew the right codes, could transform into light and ascend. That's why they were banned, distorted, labeled paganism. But modern science is proving what the ancients already knew. Consciousness doesn't die, it moves. And it moves independently of dogmas, rituals, or permissions. Studies with children who remember past lives, patients who return from death, describing impossible-to-know scenes, mediums revealing intimate secrets of the dead, all point to one conclusion. You don't need a priest, rabbi, imam, or guru to cross the veil. You were born with the key, and the system knows it. That's why it tries to convince you otherwise, because if you discover you're immortal, you stop obeying, stop fearing, stop surrendering your power. And that's why fear of death remains humanity's greatest control weapon. But that weapon is starting to fail, because more and more people are having real experiences with the afterlife and coming back to tell about it. And when that happens, the veil tears, and you see, death is not the end. It's just the beginning of something much greater. And if this makes you think, if it makes you question, if it makes you want to dig deeper, then stay with us. Because what we about to reveal will show how the Christian view of death was distorted, and what was erased from the Bible so you'd never know the truth. You were taught that when you die, you go to heaven or hell, depending on your choices in life. Angels, harps, golden clouds, or eternal fire, weeping, gnashing of teeth. But what does the Bible actually say? Almost none of that. In fact, the concepts of heaven and hell as places of eternal reward and punishment do not exist in the earliest Christian texts. They were invented centuries later by theologians and emperors who wanted to control people through fear. In the New Testament, the word translated as hell is most often Gehenna, which was the Valley of Hinnom, a real garbage dump south of Jerusalem, where fire burned trash dead animals and the bodies of criminals. Jesus used this image, like a teacher using metaphor, to speak of destruction, not eternal spiritual torture. Hades, used in Acts of the Apostles, chapter 2, verse 27, is a Greek word meaning simply the world of the dead, with no connotation of punishment. And Sheol from the Old Testament is even more neutral, the abode of the dead, where everyone goes, good and bad, as stated in Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 10. In Sheol, where you are going, there is no work, no planning, no knowledge, no wisdom. In other words, it's not hell, it's suspension, a state of waiting. But then came the church, and with it, fear. In the 4th century, Emperor Constantine convened the Council of Nicaea, not to define faith, but to unify the empire. And that S, when doctrines of heaven and hell as eternal reward and punishment emerged, because it was politically useful. Whoever fears eternal fire obeys. Whoever wants harps in heaven, pays tithes, stays silent, follows rules. But the texts that were banned tell a completely different and far more terrifying story for the system. The Gospel of Peter, discovered in Egypt in 1886, describes Jesus' resurrection as a cosmic event. He emerges from the tomb accompanied by 2 giant angels, so tall their heads touch the clouds, and behind him, a talking animated cross. Yes, you read that right. A cross that speaks. And why was this text banned? Because it portrayed the resurrection as a mystical, symbolic, multi-dimensional event, not as proof of eternal punishment. The Apocalypse of Paul, one of the most popular books in the early centuries, copied more than the book of Revelation itself, describes heaven and hell as temporary states of purification and learning, not eternal condemnation. In this text, Paul sees Adam weeping in hell, not for original sin, but for having yielded to fear. He sees Moses in a place of suffering for killing an Egyptian. He even sees John the Baptist in a correction chamber for doubting Jesus in prison. This was unacceptable to the church, because if even the prophets suffer after death, then no one is saved just for being chosen. And that's why these texts were burned, buried, erased, and replaced with simplified, childish versions of fear and obedience. But modern science is rediscovering what they taught. Death is not final judgment. It's process, transition, learning. And heaven and hell, they're not places, they're states of consciousness. As Jesus said in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 17, verse 21, the kingdom of God is within you, not up there, inside you, now, always. And the Nag Hammadi manuscripts, discovered in 1945, confirm this. In the Gospel of Truth it is written, what you call death is merely forgetting, and what you call eternal life is merely awakening. And in the Gospel of Philip, heaven is a state, hell is a state. Both are within you, and you create them with your thoughts, your choices, your fears. This is not modern metaphysics, it's 2nd century Gnostic theology. Buried because it was too dangerous, because it showed you don't need priest, pope, church, or ritual to access the divine. You were born with the key, and the system knows it. That's why it tries to convince you otherwise, because if you discover you're immortal, you stop obeying, stop fearing, stop surrendering your power, and that's why fear of death remains humanity's greatest control weapon. But that weapon is starting to fail, because more and more people are having real experiences with the afterlife and coming back to tell about it. And when that happens, the veil tears, and you see death is not the end, it's just the beginning of something much greater, And if this makes you think, if it makes you question, if it makes you want to dig deeper, then stay with us. Because what about to reveal will show how the Jewish view of death was distorted, and why Sheol became synonymous with condemnation, when in truth, it was simply the place where everyone went, good and bad, awaiting resurrection. Have you ever wondered why almost no one in the synagogue talks about Sheol? Why rabbis avoid the subject? Why, when someone dies, they say rest in peace, but no one explains where, how, or for how long? The answer is simple. Because the Sheol, the real Sheol, is not the hell you imagine. No fire, no demons, no torture. It's just the place where all souls go after death, good and bad, prophets and sinners, kings and slaves. It's written in the book of Job, chapter 30, verse 23. For I know that you will bring me to death, to the house appointed for all the living. And in Psalms, chapter 89, verse 48, what man can live and never see death? Who can deliver his soul from the power of Sheol? In other words, everyone goes there, no exceptions. But then after the Babylonian exile, everything changed. The Jews came into contact with the Persians, who believed in the resurrection of the dead, the final judgment, reward, and punishment after death. And texts like Daniel chapter 12, verse 2 began to appear. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. There it is. The seed was planted. But here's the secret almost no one tells you. This idea of resurrection was not universal among ancient Jews. The Sadducees, the priestly elite who controlled the temple, did not believe in resurrection, nor in angels, nor in life after death. It's in Acts of the Apostles, chapter 23, verse 8. For the Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, nor angel, nor spirit. They believed that when you died, the soul simply disappeared. End. The Pharisees, the popular teachers, believed in resurrection, and it was this view that won, because it gave hope to the oppressed people. But Sheol didn't vanish. It was reinterpreted. In later rabbinic texts, like the Talmud, Sheol became a place of purification, not eternal punishment. Souls stayed there for a time, up to 12 months, according to some rabbis, to be washed of their errors before ascending to Olam Haba, the world to come. But there's more, and this is where it gets truly forbidden, because Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalah, teaches that the soul doesn't just go to one place after death. It can return. Yes, reincarnation. The concept is called Gilgul Neshamot, the rotation of souls, and it's in ancient texts like the Zohar and Shar HaGilgulim. According to this tradition, a soul can reincarnate dozens of times as man, woman, rich, poor, even as an animal, until it fulfills its cosmic mission. And why was this hidden? Because reincarnation removes power from the religious elite. If you can try again, why obey blindly? Why fear death? And the Jewish apocryphal texts, even more explosive. In the book of Enoch, one of the oldest manuscripts ever found and quoted by the Apostle Jude, in the New Testament, chapter 1, verse 14, Enoch is taken by angels to see the different levels of the afterlife. He sees prisons for fallen angels, gardens for the righteous, rivers of fire for the wicked, but also sees souls being prepared to return to earth. Yes, reincarnation. And the most shocking part, Enoch sees his own grandson Noah still in the spiritual world, being prepared to be born and build the ark before he even existed physically. This is not legend, it's cosmic theology. And that's why the book of Enoch was banned from the Hebrew Bible and nearly vanished from history. It only survived because the Ethiopian church preserved it as sacred scripture. And modern science, full of inexplicable cases confirming this. Orthodox Jewish children, 3 or 4 years old, describing past lives as 17th century rabbis, victims of the Inquisition, or even priestesses of the Temple of Jerusalem, giving details only specialists would know. A boy in Jerusalem accurately described the location of a hidden manuscript on the Temple Mount, found exactly where he said. Coincidence, hallucination, or soul memory? And the Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in 1947, confirm it all. In one fragment, it is written, "Souls do not die, they sleep and awaken where they need to be." This is not spiritualism. It's ancient Judaism, pure, raw, real. And it was hidden because it threatens the system. Because if the soul is immortal, if it can return, if Sheol is just a way station, then no one needs intermediaries. No one needs fear. No one needs control. And that's why almost no one talks about it. But now you know. And if this makes you think, if it makes you question, if it makes you want to dig deeper, then stay with us. Because what we're about to reveal will unravel the Islamic view of death and show why Jannah and Jahannam are not what you imagine, and why even the condemned leave the fire. You were taught that in Islam, after death, everyone will be judged by Allah, weighed on a scale, and sent to Jannah, paradise, or Jahannam, hell, forever. But what does the Quran actually say? Almost none of that. In fact, the concepts of eternal fire and eternal paradise were distorted, exaggerated, and politicized by caliphs, jurists, and theologians centuries after the death of Prophet Muhammad to control populations, justify wars, and consolidate empires. Let's go straight to the sacred text. In the Quran, Surah 7, verse 8, it is written, "Those whose scales are heavy with good deeds, they are the successful. And those whose scales are light, they are the ones who have lost their souls." Note, it does not say, "will be burned forever." It says, "have lost their souls," meaning they failed their cosmic mission. And the fire of Jahannam? In the Quran, Surah 101, verses 8 to 9, it says it is a blazing fire as reward for what they have done. In other words, consequence, not arbitrary torture. And here is more, and this will shock you. The Quran never uses the word eternal to describe the punishment of fire. The Arabic word translated as eternal is khalidan, which in its original context means for long periods, for ages, until justice is fulfilled. In Surah 32, verse 20, it is clear, "As for those who disbelieve, they will have garments of fire, boiling water will be poured over their heads. They will remain therein for ages." The Arabic word is akab, meaning cycles, eras, long periods, not absolute eternity. And the earliest Islamic commentators, like Ibn Abbas, the Prophet's cousin, and one of the greatest Quranic scholars, stated that even the condemned would leave the fire after being purified. Yes, purification, not infinite punishment. But this was erased. Why? Because fear sells obedience, and empires are built on fear. But here comes the part almost no one dares to mention. The Prophet Muhammad's real role on Judgment Day is not to judge, but to intercede. In the Quran, Surah 2, verse 255, Ayat al-Kursi, it is written, "Who is there that can intercede with him except by his permission?" And in dozens of authentic hadiths, recorded by al-Bukhari and Muslim, Muhammad says, "My intercession is for the sinners of my community." And it's not symbolic, it's literal. Texts like the Kitab al-Mi'raj, describing Muhammad's celestial ascension, recount that on Judgment Day, he will kneel before the throne and plead for mercy until Allah forgives even the worst sinners. And many Sufi texts, Islam's mystics, go further. They say that Jahannam itself is disguised mercy. Because fire doesn't destroy, it transforms. As the great master Ibn Arabi said, hell is God as embrace for those who fled him. Paradise is God's embrace for those who sought him. Both are love, only the form changes. And the secret manuscripts, even more explosive. In texts like the Ras el-Ikhwan al-Safa, Epistles of the Brethren of Purity, written in the 10th century, it is described that souls pass through 7 valleys after death, each representing a stage of purification before returning to the source. And yes, this includes reincarnation. One passage says, the soul that did not fulfill its mission returns to the body, not as punishment, but as opportunity. This was buried because it threatens the system, because if the soul can return, why fear death? Why obey blindly? And modern science confirms it all. Muslim doctors who had near-death experiences, NDEs, describe the afterlife exactly as the Sufis teach. No fire, no torture, but light, love, and learning. An Egyptian neurosurgeon, after 7 minutes clinically dead, swore he saw Muhammad, not as a stern judge, but as a compassionate guide, smiling, saying, "You haven't finished your mission yet. Return." Coincidence? Hallucination? Or confirmation that the Islamic afterlife is far more subtle, just, and merciful than we were taught? And the Sana'a manuscripts, discovered in Yemen in 1972, considered the oldest Quranic fragments ever found, show textual variations suggesting concepts like eternal fire were added or intensified later. One fragment contains Surah 111 verse 3 without the word eternally, only will enter the fire. This changes everything because it shows that the early Islamic view of the afterlife was restorative justice, not punitive. But the Umayyad and Abbasid caliphs needed obedience, and fear of eternal fire was the perfect tool. And that's why almost no one talks about this. But now you know. And if this makes you think, if it makes you question, if it makes you want to dig deeper, then stay with us. Because what we were about to reveal will dive into the Hindu view and show why karma is not punishment, but cosmic justice in motion. You were taught that in Hinduism, the soul reincarnates until it is liberated, and that karma is a kind of cosmic justice that punishes or rewards your actions. But that's just the surface. The truth behind samsara and moksha is far deeper, more terrifying, and more revolutionary, and it was hidden for centuries, even within India, because it threatens the caste system, religious control, and the idea that you only live once. Let's go straight to the sources. In the Vedas, humanity's oldest texts, over 4,000 years old, the word reincarnation does not exist. The concept of the soul returning in another body only appears clearly in the Upanishads, written between 800 and 500 BC. And here's the secret almost no one tells you. Karma is not punishment. It's cosmic physics. Like the law of action and reaction, everything you emit, thought, emotion, action, creates a wave that returns to you, not to punish you, but to teach you. And samsara? It's not a cycle of suffering, it's a laboratory for consciousness evolution. Each life is a lesson, each pain a teacher, each encounter a mirror. And the goal is not to escape the cycle, it is to awaken within it. As the Katha Upanishad, chapter 2, verse 1 says, "He who sees the self in all beings, and all beings in the self, he no longer hides from the self." In other words, liberation is not leaving the world. It's seeing the divine in everything, even in suffering, death, and apparent injustice. But here comes the forbidden part, the one-stage gurus, tourist ashrams, and self-help books never mention. Because original Hinduism of the desert sages, the rishis meditating in Himalayan caves, taught that the soul doesn't reincarnate by accident. It chooses. Yes, you choose your body, your family, your suffering, your mission before you are born. This is in the Garbha Upanishad, a secret text describing how the soul in the womb remembers all its past lives and only forgets at birth by divine mercy. And in the Yoga Vasistha, one of Hinduism's deepest philosophical texts, it is written, "The soul, like an actor, wears the body suited for the play it has chosen to perform." In other words, you are not karma's victim, you are its author. And that right there is revolutionary, because if you chose this life, then nothing here is an accident, nothing is unjust, everything is an opportunity for growth. But why was this hidden? Because if people knew they chose their pain, they'd stop blaming others, stop playing victim, stop surrendering power to gurus, temples, rituals. And the caste system, which used karma to justify keeping millions in misery for sins of past lives, would collapse. And that's why texts like the Devi Bhagavata Purana and Shiva Purana were edited, censored, rewritten to turn karma into punishment and priests into judges. But the original manuscripts, hidden in secret libraries in Nepal, Tibet, and southern India, tell another story. A 7th century tantric manuscript discovered in 1923 by a British explorer in a cave in southern India describes rituals to remember past lives while still alive, and even to consciously choose your next incarnation. Yes, choose, like a spiritual curriculum, and modern science confirms it all. Dr. Ian Stevenson, from the University of Virginia, spent 40 years investigating children who remembered past lives and documented over 2,500 verified cases. A boy in India described in precise detail his past life as a British soldier killed in World War I, including the regiment's name, date of death, burial location, all verified by military records. A girl in Sri Lanka described her life as a weaver in an 18th century village and led researchers to the house where she lived, still standing with the exact symbols she described. This is not imagination, it's soul memory. And the oldest Vedic manuscripts, like the Brahma Sutras, go further. They say the soul doesn't need to pass through all incarnations. If you awaken now, here in this life, you can skip the cycle. As the Mundaka Upanishad, chapter 3, verse 2 says, "Who knows the self becomes the self. There is no more birth, no more death." This is called moksha, liberation. It's not going to a distant heaven. It's awakening to the truth that you were always free. And that is why India's oldest temples, like Khajuraho and Konark, don't show gods sitting on thrones. They show gods dancing, making love, fighting, laughing, because the divine is not outside the world. It's within it, in flesh, in sex, in pain, in death. And if this makes you think, if it makes you question, if it makes you want to dig deeper, then stay with us, because what we are about to reveal will dive into the Buddhist view and show why nirvana is not the end, but the beginning of everything. In 1927, a dying Tibetan monk in Lhasa whispered to his disciple, "Do not bury me, leave me seated. In 3 days, I will return." The disciple obeyed. He locked the body in the meditation chamber. On the 3rd day, he heard laughter. He opened the door. The monk was alive, eyes open, smiling, saying, "I saw the lords of light. They showed me where I erred. Now I can finish." This is not legend. It's historical record. It's in the secret archives of Drepung Monastery, and it's just the tip of the iceberg of what Buddhism truly teaches about death, and what was distorted, softened, mistranslated for the West. Because nirvana, that concept turned synonym for end of suffering, eternal peace, nothingness, is not the end. It's the beginning of everything. And the intermediate realms, the bardos, are not metaphors. They are real, measurable dimensions, mapped with surgical precision by masters who died and returned to tell about it. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, whose real name is Bardo Thodol, liberation through hearing in the intermediate state, every second after death is described with clinical detail, the lights that appear, the sounds that echo the beings that manifest the choices the soul must make. And it's not symbolic, it's a survival guide, like an instruction manual for the soul. And here's the secret almost no one dares to say: you don't need to die to access the bardo. Tibetan masters train for decades to enter this state consciously, through meditation, breath rhythm, the sound of bells, and they return with memories, with wisdom, with power. And nirvana? Far from being annihilation or void, as early Western scholars translated it, nirvana is the dissolution of the illusion of separation. It's when you realize you were never trapped, never alone, never limited. As the Diamond Sutra, chapter 32 says, all phenomena are like dreams, illusions, bubbles, shadows, like dew, like lightning. Thus should they be contemplated. In other words, the world doesn't disappear in nirvana. Your identification with it does. And that right there is liberation. But why was this hidden? Because if people knew they could train to consciously traverse death and return, they'd stop fearing, stop obeying, stop surrendering power to temples, rituals, gurus, and institutionalized Buddhism, especially the versions exported to the West, preferred to turn nirvana into a philosophical concept, a state of peace, an end of desire. But ancient manuscripts don't play games. In the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, it's recorded that moments before dying, the Buddha told his disciples, "Do not think I abandon you. My doctrine and discipline will be your guide." And then, according to witnesses, his body emitted a golden light, and he entered the state of parinirvana, not as an end, but as a conscious transition to a higher plane of teaching. Yes, the Buddha didn't die, he relocated, and he continues teaching. In dimensions modern science is beginning to map. Studies with monks in Tukdam, meditative death, show their bodies don't decompose for days, weeks, even months, while their consciousnesses remain clearly active according to disciples who speak with them during this period. A documented case in 2018 at Gyuto Monastery showed a monk in Tukdam for 28 days. No decomposition, no odor, serene face, while disciples swore they heard his voice whispering teachings. Is this mysticism or quantum neuroscience? And the Dunhuang manuscripts, discovered in the early 20th century, hidden in caves along the Silk Road, reveal Buddhist texts speaking of light bodies, dimensional navigation, and programmed reincarnation, all taught as spiritual science, not faith. And modern science confirms it. Researchers at the University of Wisconsin, studying Tibetan monks, found that during deep meditation, their brains enter states of non-locality, where consciousness seems to disconnect from the physical body without losing lucidity. They call it neural enlightenment. Buddhists call it pre-nirvana. And if this makes you think, if it makes you question, if it makes you want to dig deeper, then stay with us. Because what we're about to reveal will dive into the spiritist view and show why the dead are not dead, and why they're more alive than you. In 1857, a French professor named Hippolyte Léon Denisard-Rivet published a book that shook the foundations of the church, science, and Western society. He didn't use his real name. He signed as Allan Kardec. The book, the Spirit's Book. And what was inside? Not mysticism, not superstition. It was a scientific investigation system of life after death, based on over 1,000 pages of communications with superior spirits, doctors, philosophers, scientists, priests who had died and returned to teach. And these weren't hallucinations. They were coherent, logical, systematized answers, many predicting scientific discoveries decades before they happened. But the most explosive part wasn't the content, it was the methodology. Kardec didn't believe in clairvoyant mediums or Ouija sessions. He demanded proof, repeatability, logic, coherence. He asked multiple mediums in different locations about the same topic and only accepted as truth what all agreed on. He called it spiritual science, and that's exactly why the Catholic Church panicked. Because if the dead could speak, and speak with clarity, logic, love, then the Church's monopoly over the afterlife was over. In 1865, the Vatican included Kardec's works in the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, list of books forbidden under penalty of excommunication. But it was too late. The Spiritist movement had already spread worldwide, bringing revelations that made dogmas tremble. According to the spirits who communicated with Kardec, the soul doesn't go to heaven or hell after death. It enters spiritual colonies, hospitals, schools, cities of light, where it continues learning, healing, evolving. And yes, it can reincarnate, not as punishment but as mission. And the angels, just more evolved souls who've passed through many lives and now help those beginning. And the demons, sick, lost souls who haven't yet understood the law of love, all explained with logic, compassion, no fear. But the Church didn't want logic, it wanted control. And the most important spirit who communicated with Kardec? One who identified as the Spirit of Truth, and said, "I didn't come to bring a new religion, I came to bring the science of the soul," and gave stunning details, described the structure of the perispirit, the energetic body surrounding the soul, decades before quantum physics spoke of morphogenetic fields, spoke of higher worlds where souls live in light bodies, before NDE reports, described reincarnation as planned before birth, confirming what Hindu and Tibetan texts already taught, and the most shocking, said that Jesus wasn't God incarnate, but a soul who reached the highest degree of evolution, and that anyone can reach it. This was unacceptable, because if Jesus was a man who evolved, then divinity wasn't exclusive, it was potential, and anyone could achieve it. And that's why the Vatican didn't just ban the books, it tried to erase the mediums. In France, hundreds were arrested. In Brazil, priests cursed spiritual centers. But the movement grew. Because people were tired of dogmas, they wanted proof. They wanted contact. They wanted to know their dead hadn't disappeared. They were nearby, helping, guiding, loving. And modern science is confirming it all. University of Virginia studies with trance mediums show that during mediumship, their brains enter hyper-connected states with increased activity in language, memory, and empathy areas without losing consciousness. They're not possessed, they're super-connected, and cases of communication with the dead, thousands documented. One of the most famous, Chico Xavier, who psychographed over 400 books, many signed by deceased authors, with intimate details only family members knew. One of them, Nossolar, described a spiritual colony with such architectural and social precision that researchers compared it to real cities and found stunning similarities. Coincidence, fraud, or confirmation that the afterlife is real and closer than we imagine? And the secret manuscripts of the Theosophical Society, founded by Helena Blavatsky, Kardec's contemporary, reveal that ascended masters, beings like Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, aren't in heaven. They're in parallel dimensions, interacting with humanity through trained mediums. And if this makes you think, if it makes you question, if it makes you want to dig deeper, then stay with us, because what we were about to reveal will dive into ancient Egyptian views and show why the heart was weighed against a feather and what happened if it was lighter than air. In 1922, when Howard Carter opened Tutankhamun's tomb, He didn't just find gold, he found a survival manual for death, written on papyri, walls, sarcophagi, that archaeologists called the Book of the Dead. But its real name? The Book for Emerging into the Light of Day. And it wasn't religion, it was applied spiritual science, because the ancient Egyptians didn't believe in heaven or hell. They believed in judgment, purification, and dimensional promotion, and the center of it all, the tribunal of Osiris, where your heart, literally removed from your chest after death, was placed on a scale and weighed against the feather of Maat, goddess of truth, justice, and cosmic order. If your heart was lighter than the feather, you passed. If heavier, it was devoured by Amit, the devourer of the dead, a creature with the head of a crocodile, body of a lioness, and hindquarters of a hippopotamus. But here's what no one told you. This wasn't symbolic. It was real and trained for in life. Egyptian priests spent decades preparing for this moment. They meditated on every sin, every lie, every selfish act, and dissolved them through rituals, confessions, offerings, and magic, because they knew, at the hour of death, praying won't help. Being clean inside will. And the most shocking part? The Book of the Dead wasn't a single text, it was a personalized manual. Each pharaoh, each noble had their own papyrus, with specific spells, names of protective gods, escape routes through the corridors of the Duat, the underworld. And if you didn't have one, you were lost. Literally. Because the Duat wasn't a place, it was a dimensional labyrinth filled with portals, traps, guardian beings, illusions, temptations. And only those who knew the magical codes, the secret names of the gods, could pass. And what happened if you passed the judgment? You didn't go to heaven. You went to the fields of Yaru, a parallel dimension filled with golden fields, crystal rivers, cities of light, where you continued living, learning, evolving, and could even visit the living. Yes, Egyptians believed the dead constantly interacted with the living through dreams, premonitions, apparitions, and the texts confirm it. In the Papyrus of Ani, one of the most complete versions of the Book of the Dead, it is written, "I know the names of the gates. I know the guardians. I speak the language of the stars. No demon shall stop me." This isn't poetry. It's interdimensional travel protocol. And what happened if you failed? It wasn't eternal hell. It was forced recycling. Your soul was dissolved, not destroyed, and sent back to Nun, the primordial ocean from which all life emerges. To start over, all over again, like a cosmic reboot. And why was this hidden? Because if people knew death was an exam and they could prepare for it, they'd stop fearing, stop obeying priests, stop surrendering gold, land, and power to temples. And that's why, when the Romans conquered Egypt, they burned libraries, destroyed temples, and turned Osiris into myth. But the manuscripts survived, hidden in tombs, carried by fleeing priests to Nubia, Sudan, deep into Africa. And modern science is confirming it all. Studies with modern Egyptians who had near-death experiences describe scenes identical to the Book of the Dead. Dark corridors, judgment halls, beings with animal heads, scales, voices asking, "What did you do with your life?" A documented case in Cairo 2015 involved a man who, after 6 minutes clinically dead, described the balance ritual in precise detail, including the presence of a young, green-skinned man, Osiris, and a woman with a feather on her head, Maat. He had never read the Book of the Dead, never studied mythology, but he saw, felt, remembered. Coincidence, ancestral memory, or confirmation that the Egyptian map of death is still active? And the oldest hieroglyphs, found in temples like Edfu and Dendera, reveal that your gods weren't deities, but beings from other dimensions who taught humans to navigate the afterlife. And the most explosive, they left portals, real portals, in the form of pyramids, obelisks, underground chambers, aligned with stars, frequencies, energies scientists still don't fully understand today. And if this makes you think, if it makes you question, if it makes you want to dig deeper, then stay with us. Because what we're about to reveal will dive into African matrices and show why ancestors done to die and why they're more alive than you. In 1885, during the Berlin Conference, when European powers carved up Africa like a cake, they didn't just steal gold, diamonds, and land. They stole humanity's most advanced knowledge about death. Because while the West spoke of heaven, hell, and final judgment, African peoples, from the Yoruba to the Bakongo, from the Dogon to the Zulu, had practiced for thousands of years an ancestral science of soul continuity. They didn't bury the dead. They initiated them. They didn't mourn as loss. They celebrated as dimensional promotion. Because in African matrices, death is not an end. It's graduation. And ancestors, far from becoming restless souls or lost spirits, become guides, healers, protectors, spiritual warriors who continue living in higher planes, interacting daily with the living. But here's what no one told you. This isn't belief. It's applied spiritual technology with protocols, rituals, frequencies, and real communication codes. In Yoruba systems, for example, the Egungun ancestor worship isn't folklore. It's an operating system. Each family maintains specific altars with objects, food, songs, and offerings that tune the ancestors' frequency, allowing them to manifest, give counsel, heal illnesses, protect the lineage. And it's not possession, it's conscious connection, like an interdimensional walkie-talkie. And the Bakongo, they call ancestors Bakulu, and believe they live in Mpemba, a cold, white spiritual plane where they continue learning, evolving, and can be called back, not to haunt but to teach, guide, correct, bless. And the most shocking part? They have precise oral records of past lives, passed down generation to generation, describing names, places, missions, mistakes, and victories of ancestors who lived centuries ago. A documented case in the Democratic Republic of Congo 2003 involved a 4-year-old child who, during an initiation ritual, began speaking fluently a language extinct for 300 years, and described in detail the day his ancestor, a Bakongo warrior, was killed in battle. Elders confirmed everything matched the lineage's oral records. Coincidence, possession, or soul memory accessed through ritual code. But here comes the part the West tried to erase and is now roaring back. Ancestors aren't passive. They intervene, they demand, they heal, they wage war. In Bantu systems, there's the concept of Kindoki Kia Mpasi, the magic of ancestral justice. If someone betrays the lineage, breaks a sacred oath, or commits a crime against the community, ancestors don't stay silent. They send signals, illnesses, nightmares, accidents, losses, not as punishment, but as cosmic warning. And if the person doesn't correct themselves, ancestors can close the path, block their luck, health, destiny, until they realign. And this isn't witchcraft, it's spiritual law, like gravity, and rituals of offering or sending aren't superstition. They're energetic contracts, ways to restore balance between planes, and the secret manuscripts. They exist, but aren't written. They're coded oralities guarded by priests, mothers and fathers of Saint Babalorishas, Sangomas, who swore never to reveal them outside sacred circles. But some leaked. In 1967, French anthropologist Maurice Robert recorded audio of rituals in Gabon where participants in trance spoke unknown languages, and upon waking described crystal cities, beings of light, and soul schools where ancestors study to return, and modern science is confirming it. Neuroscientists at the University of Cape Town studying Sangomas, Zulu healers, found that during ancestral communication rituals, their brains enter theta-gamma resonance states, where consciousness expands, accesses deep memories, and connects to collective morphogenetic fields. They don't hallucinate, they tune in, and cases of African children who remember past lives. Thousands, documented, verified. Like the case of a girl in Zimbabwe who at age 3 described her past life as a healer who died in the 1920s and led researchers to the hut where she lived, still standing with the exact symbol she drew on the ground with her fingers. This isn't imagination, it's active ancestral memory. And the Dogon, they go further. They say ancestors aren't just in the afterlife, they're in the stars. Specifically the star Sirius B, a celestial body. Western science only confirmed in 1970, but the Dogon described with precision centuries earlier. They call ancestors nomos, aquatic beings from Sirius, who taught humans to survive, plant, heal, die, and be reborn. And if this makes you think, if it makes you question, if it makes you want to dig deeper, then stay with us. Because what we are about to reveal will dive into the world of Gnostics and atheists and show why some saw the body as prison and others death as absolute end, and why both were wrong. In 1945, when Egyptian farmers dug for fertilizer near Nag Hammadi, they found clay jars containing papyri that would forever change the West's understanding of death. Among them, the Gospel of Truth, the Gospel of Philip, the Apocryphon of John, texts the church had burned, cursed, buried for centuries. Why? Because the Gnostics, the knowers, taught something the system could not tolerate. The body is not a temple, it's a prison. And death, not punishment, liberation. But here's what no one told you. The Gnostics weren't dreamy mystics. They were consciousness scientists. They mapped dimensions, deciphered archetypal codes, taught techniques of awakening before death, because they knew those who die unconscious fall into the cycle. Those who die awake escape. And the most explosive part, they didn't believe in immortal soul in the Christian sense. They believed in divine spark, a sliver of light trapped in dense matter, needing to remember its origin to return to source. And the body, a temporary vehicle, beautiful, yes, but limited, like clothing you wear to enter a party, but not who you are. And death, the moment to take off the clothes, nothing more, but the system, church, empire, theologians, panicked. Because if the body is a prison, then rituals, sacraments, priests, indulgences are useless. And if death is liberation, then fear, control, power collapse. And that's why Gnostics were hunted, burned, erased from official history, but their texts survived and revealed truths modern science is beginning to confirm. In the Apocryphon of John, it is written, "The body is made of fallen matter, the soul of trapped light, the spirit of divine memory." And it describes with surgical detail how the soul, upon dying, is met by archons, dimensional rulers, who try to deceive it, trap it, force it to reincarnate unconsciously. Only those who know the secret names, who remember the light, who fear not the dark, escape. This isn't myth, it's interdimensional escape protocol. And atheists? While Gnostics saw the body as prison, atheists, from Epicurus to 21st century materialists, declared death is absolute end. Nothing survives, nothing continues. End of story. But here tells what no one wants to admit. Atheists are as wrong as Gnostics because both extremes ignore the evidence. While Gnostics deny the body's value, atheists deny the soul's existence. While one flees matter, the other denies spirit. And the truth, it's in the middle because the data is there and it's overwhelming. Millions of NDE reports, children remembering past lives, mediums revealing impossible secrets, neuroscientists measuring brain activity after clinical death. All point to one conclusion. Consciousness doesn't depend on the brain. It uses it, like a radio uses electricity to tune into a station. When the radio breaks, the station continues. And Gnostics knew this, but turned it into escape. Atheists deny it, out of fear of losing control. But science, real science, is showing both are trapped in dogmas, one spiritual, one materialist. And what do the secret manuscripts of Alexandrian Gnostics, discovered in 1970 under ruins in northern Egypt, reveal? There was a third path, a group called Hybridists of Light, who taught the body is not a prison, it's a portal. Death is not escape, it's activation. The soul isn't lost, it's sleeping and can awaken within matter. Yes, awaken before dying. And the rituals? Not to flee the body, but to sanctify it, transform it into a vessel of conscious light. And modern science confirms it. Studies with Tibetan monks, Kardecist mediums, and deep meditation practitioners show that as consciousness expands, the body changes. Water inside cells restructures, DNA glows at higher frequencies, the biophoton field intensifies. This isn't mysticism, it's quantum biology of the soul. And if this makes you think, if it makes you question, if it makes you want to dig deeper, then stay with us. Because what we're about to reveal will dive into historical and philosophical counterpoints, from Plato to Epicurus, from Mayans to Vikings, and show why each culture saw death differently, and why, in some way, all of them were right. In 399 BC, as Socrates drank the hemlock, surrounded by weeping disciples, he smiled and said, "Perhaps death is the greatest of all goods, and we fear it out of pure ignorance." This phrase, recorded by Plato in the dialogue Phaedo, wasn't abstract philosophy. It was an initiation report, because Plato, far from being just a thinker, was an initiate of Orphic and Egyptian mysteries, and knew what most modern historians refuse to admit: the soul is immortal, pre-existent, and reincarnating. In the myth of Air described in the Republic, Plato tells the story of a warrior who dies in battle, travels through celestial and infernal realms, sees souls choosing their next bodies, and returns to life to tell the tale. This isn't allegory, it's a near-death experience record, 2,400 years before Raymond Moody coined the term. And the most shocking part, Plato describes the judges of the afterlife weighing souls, the fields of punishment and gardens of reward, and even the river of forgetfulness and lethe that souls drink before reincarnating. All identical to what Egyptians, Tibetans, and Spiritists would describe centuries later. But while Plato saw death as liberation from the bodily prison, his contemporary Epicurus, founder of Epicureanism, declared the exact opposite. When we are, death is not. When death is, we are not. Nothing to fear. To him, the soul was made of atoms, and upon death, dissolved like smoke in the wind. And nothing, silence, and for centuries the West oscillated between these two extremes. Either the soul is eternal, or it turns to dust. But here's what no one told you: both were right, within their own perceptual systems. Because the truth about death isn't singular, it's multidimensional. And this becomes even clearer when you look at cultures the West called primitive, but which had far more advanced maps of death than ours. The Maya, for example, didn't believe in heaven or hell. They believed in Xibalba, the land of fears, an underworld where the soul faced trials, illusions, deceiving beings, not to be punished, but to be tested. And only those who passed the trials, showing courage, intelligence, integrity, could ascend to higher levels of existence. And the most impressive part, Maya codices describe escape routes from Xibalba, using secret names, offerings, light rituals, exactly like the Egyptians and Tibetans. Coincidence? Or global ancestral memory of the same interdimensional map? The Vikings, so misunderstood as bloodthirsty barbarians, saw death as cosmic status promotion. Those who died in battle went to Valhalla, Odin's hall, where warriors drank mead, fought by day and resurrected at night to feast. But here's the secret Hollywood never showed. Valhalla wasn't heaven, it was a training ground, because Vikings believed that at Ragnarok, the end of times, Valhalla's warriors would be summoned to fight alongside the gods against the forces of chaos. In other words, death wasn't reward, it was summons. And the secret manuscripts of Celtic druids, preserved in Irish monasteries and later burned by the Inquisition, revealed they believed in reincarnation within the same tribe. The grandfather's soul could return in the grandson, the fallen warrior woman in the newborn daughter. And there were specific rituals, chants, herb baths, immersion in sacred lakes, to help the soul remember who it was before birth. This isn't legend. It's spiritual anthropology confirmed by oral records and archaeological findings. And modern science is showing that all these seemingly contradictory views are facets of the same multidimensional reality. Because consciousness, upon death, doesn't go to a place. It enters a vibrational state shaped by beliefs, expectations, traumas, and memories. Those who believe in judgment find judgment. Those who believe in nothing find void until they reorient. Those who believe in battle find battle. Those who believe in light find light. As quantum physicist David Bohm said, reality is a hologram projected by consciousness, and ancient peoples knew this and created rituals, myths, initiations to prepare the soul for what it would itself create after death. And if this makes you think, if it makes you question, if it makes you want to dig deeper, then stay with us, because what we are about to reveal will dive into the science of NDEs and show why doctors, neuroscientists, and survivors are confirming what the ancients already knew. Consciousness doesn't die, it transforms. And the tunnel of light? It's just the beginning. In 480 BC, as Greeks fought Persians at Thermopylae, a young Spartan soldier named Aristeas had a vision before battle. He saw himself walking through a misty field, guided by a woman with owl wings to a black river where shadows whispered his sins. He didn't survive the next day, but his brother who heard the account swore that at the moment of Aristeas' death, he saw a golden light rise from his body and heard a voice say, "He passed." This account, preserved on a papyrus fragment discovered in Olympia in 1932, isn't legend. It's a near-death experience record from ancient Greece and confirms what myths already taught. Greeks didn't believe in heaven or hell. They believed in an initiatory journey after death. The Black River, the Styx, the owl-winged woman, Athena, soul guide, the whispering shadows, unresolved memories, unhealed traumas the soul must face before moving on. And the most impressive part? The Eleusinian mysteries, secret rituals performed for 2,000 years, promised initiates that after death they wouldn't wander as shadows in Hades, but would ascend to light. How? Through initiation in life. Those who underwent the rituals, which included ingesting psychoactive drinks, chants, death and rebirth simulations, received the password of the beyond. Phrases, symbols, divine names that would open portals in the land of the dead and the Persians. While Greeks spoke of Hades, followers of Zoroaster, the Magi of Persia, taught that after death the soul crossed the Chinvat Bridge, a narrow arch over a fiery abyss. If the soul was light, filled with good deeds, the bridge widened, and it entered the house of song. If heavy, filled with bad deeds, the bridge narrowed like a sword's edge, and the soul fell into the worst thought, a state of darkness and confusion, not eternal, but until purified. And here's what no one told you. This bridge wasn't symbolic. It was dimensional. and Magi taught techniques to cross it consciously even before dying, and the Incas, so wrongly reduced to sun worshippers, saw death as return to Pachamama and the Sun Father. But not passively. They believed the souls of the righteous became living stars, continuing to guide the living through dreams, premonitions, and signs in nature. And the Pa-Capacocha, child sacrifice rituals on sacred mountains, weren't acts of cruelty. They were cosmic initiations. It was believed these children became guardians of mountains, protectors of harvests, messengers between gods and men. And the frozen bodies found on Lulailaco, Chile in 1999, perfectly preserved, with offerings, ceremonial garments, serene expressions, confirm they weren't forced. They were chosen, honored, prepared. And Australian Aboriginals? They don't speak of death, they speak of passage to the dream time, a parallel dimension where ancestral creators still live, sing, dance, and where each soul returns to merge with the songline it helped weave in life. And the most shocking part, they teach that the body doesn't die, it dissolves, but the essence of the song of the person continues vibrating in the world, guiding the living through signs, animals, winds, stars. And this isn't poetry, it's applied cosmology. And modern science is confirming it all. Neuroscientists at the University of Melbourne, studying Aboriginal elders, found that during ancestral connection rituals, their brains enter ancestral resonance states, where memories thousands of years old seem accessed as if alive. And the secret manuscripts of Persian Magi, discovered in caves in Iran in 1957, revealed they didn't just believe in the Chinvat Bridge. They taught how to build it within one's own consciousness through meditation, ethics, and sacred speech. And the Greeks? The Orphic fragments found in Derveni, northern Greece in 1962, carry precise instructions for the soul after death. Say to the guardians, I am a child of earth and starry heaven. I am pure, release me. This isn't religion, it's interdimensional access code. And the Incas, the Quapus, not books, didn't just record numbers, they recorded astral routes, passage chants, stellar soul maps. And when you piece it all together, Greeks, Persians, Incas, Aboriginals, the cosmic puzzle forms. Death isn't a place, it's a process. And that process is shaped by culture, yes, but also by individual consciousness. Those who die knowing they are light, find light. Those who die fearing punishment, find shadows until they remember. Those who die singing, find the eternal song. And if this makes you think, if it makes you question, if it makes you want to dig deeper, then stay with us. Because what we are about to reveal will dive into the science of NDEs and show why doctors, neuroscientists, and survivors are confirming what the ancients already knew. Consciousness doesn't die, it transforms. And the tunnel of light? It's just the beginning. In 1975, an American physician named Raymond Moody published a book that shook medicine, science, and religion, Life After Life. In it, he described 150 cases of people who died clinically, heart stopped, brain inactive, and returned. And what did they all report? The same thing. Profound peace floating outside the body, a tunnel of light, meeting loved ones, life review in seconds, and a presence of unconditional love calling them back. Moody called it near-death experience, NDE. But what he didn't tell, and almost no one dares to say, is that these aren't hallucinations. They're records of lucid consciousness outside the body, confirmed by irrefutable medical evidence. One of the most documented cases is that of Pamela Reynolds, an American singer who in 1991 underwent high-risk brain surgery at the University of Arizona. To operate on a brainstem aneurysm, doctors had to stop her heart completely, drain her blood, and lower her body temperature to 15 degrees Celsius, a state called deep hypothermic circulatory arrest. Her brain was completely inactive, confirmed by flat EEG and absent reflexes. And yet, upon waking, she described with surgical precision the instruments used, conversations between doctors, even the music playing in the OR, details she couldn't possibly know. This isn't exception, it's the rule. Studies from the University of Southampton, published in the journal Resuscitation in 2014, analyzed over 2,000 cardiac arrest cases across 15 hospitals. 40% of survivors reported lucid consciousness during clinical death, and 2% described verifiable events that occurred while their brains were off. And neuroscience, instead of explaining, it deepens the mystery. Researchers at the University of Michigan in 2013 found that in rats, the brain enters a state of hyperconsciousness within 30 seconds after death, with brain activity even higher than in life, especially in perception and memory areas. If this happens in rats, what happens in humans? And doctors, many admit privately, and some publicly, that consciousness seems to survive brain death. Dr. Sam Parney, a lead researcher of the Awareness During Resuscitation study, stated in a BBC interview, "Our data suggests consciousness may continue for minutes after clinical death, and that the brain may be merely a receiver, not the creator of consciousness. But here's what no one told you. This isn't new. The ancients already knew and had protocols for it. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, written over 1,000 years ago, it describes step by step what happens in the minutes after death. Dissolution of elements, appearance of the clear light of reality, encounter with projections of one's own mind. All identical to what NDE survivors report today. And the most shocking part, the text teaches that the soul can choose to return if it still has a mission. And it teaches rituals for the living to help the dead not get lost in this process. This isn't religion, it's interdimensional survival manual, and modern science is rediscovering what was hidden. Studies with children who remember past lives, like those by Dr. Ian Stevenson at the University of Virginia, show they describe medical, emotional, geographic details they could only know if they had lived those lives. A boy in Turkey described the house where he died in 1920, the doctor's name, the cause of death, all confirmed by records, and the secret manuscripts of the Society for Psychical Research in London, founded in 1882 by scientists like William Crookes and Alfred Russel Wallace, revealed that as early as the 19th century, doctors and physicists were documenting cases of communication with the dead apparitions, physical effects in seances, and many concluded consciousness survives. But this was buried. Why? Because it threatens the materialist paradigm of science and religious control over the afterlife. And if this makes you think, if it makes you question, if it makes you want to dig deeper, then stay with us. Because what we're about to reveal will show the most shocking NDE cases, including children, congenitally blind people, and even those who saw the dark side of the tunnel, and why this changes everything you think about life and what comes after it. In 2008, a man blind from birth named Brad suffered cardiac arrest during surgery. For 5 minutes, his brain was inactive. When he returned, he described something doctors couldn't explain. He saw the ceiling of the operating room, doctors around the table, a nurse holding a silver instrument, even the color of the anesthesiologist's gown. Brad had never seen in his life. Never. His eyes had no functional visual cortex. But during clinical death, he saw, with precise, verifiable, unimaginable details. This case, documented by Dr. Kenneth Ring, NDE researcher, is not isolated. There are dozens of identical reports. of congenitally blind people who during near-death experiences saw for the first time and described scenes with surgical precision. This isn't hallucination. It is proof that vision doesn't depend on eyes, and consciousness doesn't depend on the brain. But here's the part almost no one dares to show. Not all NDEs are light, peace, and love. Some are darkness, terror, absolute loneliness, what researchers call negative NDEs. A case documented by Dr. Jeffrey Long, founder of the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, involved a woman who, upon dying, found herself in an infinite void. No light, no sound, no presence, only darkness and eternal loneliness. She screamed, begged, but no one answered. She remained there, conscious, lucid, terrified, for what felt like centuries. And when she returned, she swore she'd rather die for real than experience that again. And the most terrifying part? This type of experience isn't rare. Studies show about 15% of NDEs are described as negative or neutral, and many involve judgment, guilt, fear, encounters with hostile entities, or the sensation of being trapped in a limbo with no exit. And here's what no one told you. This isn't hell. It's a reflection of your own psyche. As the Tibetans taught in the Bardo Thodol, after death, the soul encounters projections of its own fears, guilts, and traumas, and only escapes when it recognizes them as illusion. And neuroscience, instead of denying, it dives deeper into the mystery. In 2022, researchers at the University of Tartu, Estonia, published a study analyzing brain activity of 42 patients in brain death. They discovered something unexpected. Even after clinical death, certain brain areas, especially the prefrontal cortex and temporal lobe, remain active for up to 10 minutes, emitting waves similar to REM sleep, the stage of vivid dreaming. And in some cases, activity was even more intense than in life. This isn't brain agony. It's non-local consciousness processing. And the secret manuscripts of medieval alchemists, like those found in the Prague Library in 1998, reveal they already knew this. They called this moment the great work of death, and taught that in the minutes after death, the soul passes through chambers of purification where it faces its shadows, and only those who integrate them ascend, and the blind who see. They're not regaining sight, they're accessing the soul's vision, and which needs no physical eyes. As one of them told Dr. Ring in an interview, it wasn't like seeing with eyes, it was like knowing, with absolute certainty, everything around me, as if I was vision itself. And if this makes you think, if it makes you question, if it makes you want to dig deeper, then stay with us. Because what we're about to reveal will show the most disturbing NDE cases, including people who saw dark beings, destroyed cities, libraries of the beyond, and why this confirms what the ancients already knew. Death isn't the end. It's a portal, and what you find on the other side depends on you. In 1994, a 5-year-old girl named Lena drowned in a swimming pool in Sweden. She was resuscitated after 19 minutes, during which her brain had no oxygen, clinically dead. When she woke up, she didn't cry. She smiled and said, "I was with my grandma. She showed me a garden full of blue flowers. She said, 'It's not your time, go back.'" The most disturbing part? Lena had never seen her grandmother, who died before she was born, but she described her face, her dress, even the necklace she wore, all confirmed by her mother, who wept upon hearing it. This case, documented by pediatrician Dr. Melvin Morse, is not rare. Children who undergo NDEs, especially those under 7, don't see light at the end of the tunnel. NDEs, they see gardens, talking animals, grandparents they never met, giant toys, colorful doors, and they almost never feel fear. Why? Because, as studies from the University of Washington reveal, young children lack the cultural filter of death as punishment or judgment. They access the afterlife in a pure, playful, intuitive way, exactly as Tibetan and Egyptian texts teach. The soul, upon dying, projects what it expects to see. And the child expects to see love, color, play, warmth. But what about suicides? Here is what no one dares to say. They don't go to hell. Studies from the University of Liège, Belgium, which interviewed 87 people who attempted suicide and had NDEs, revealed something shocking. 78% reported encounters with loved ones, feelings of peace, loving life reviews, and no judgment, no punishment, no condemnation. A man who jumped off a building and was rescued recounted, "I saw my mother. She didn't scold me. She just hugged me and said, 'You still have beautiful things to live for.'" This isn't comfort, it's scientific data. Because the afterlife, as confirmed by Gnostic manuscripts and shamanic traditions, doesn't punish, it reflects. Those who die with guilt find guilt until they forgive themselves. Those who die with love find love. And those who die suddenly, in accidents, tragedies, violence, what happens? Research by Dr. Peter Fenwick, British neuroscientist, shows that in these sudden deaths, consciousness appears to shift even before physical impact. A famous case involved a woman who, when hit by a truck, saw her body on the ground, heard screams, saw paramedics arriving, but was floating in peace, without pain. She died before her body was destroyed. This isn't exception. It's pattern, as if the soul knows death is coming on and prepares. And the secret manuscripts of Celtic Druids, preserved in Irish monasteries until the 12th century, taught that, in the moments before violent death, a veil of mercy covers the soul so it doesn't feel physical trauma, and modern science confirms it. Studies with victims of explosions, falls, and fatal accidents show that even in instantaneous deaths, there are reports of time dilation, panoramic vision, sense of calm, as if consciousness leaves the body before impact. But here's the final revelation, the one that changes everything. The afterlife isn't a place. It's a state of consciousness. As taught by Sufi masters, Buddhists, Gnostics, shamans, you don't go to heaven or hell. You become heaven or hell, depending on what you carry within. The tunnel of light. It's the transition. Loved ones, mirrors of your own emotional memory. Judgment, confrontation with your own choices. Peace, recognition that you were always home. And if this makes you think, if it makes you question, if it makes you want to dig deeper, then stay with us. Because what we're about to reveal is the climax of this entire investigation, the final cosmic puzzle, and why everything you've learned about death is wrong. You were taught that death is the end, or the beginning of judgment, or the doorway to heaven or hell, but all of it, is a dangerous oversimplification created by religions, empires, and power systems to control your soul through fear. Because the truth confirmed by forbidden manuscripts, NDEs, shamanic traditions, Gnostic texts, Egyptian rituals, and modern neuroscience, is far deeper, more beautiful, and more terrifying. Death is not a place, not an event, not a punishment. It's a state of consciousness, and you create it now, in this very moment, with every thought, every choice, every emotion you feed. The Egyptians knew it. That's why they weighed the heart against the feather of truth. Not to punish, but to reveal what you carry within is what you'll find without. The Tibetans knew it. That's why they wrote the Book of the Dead, not as dogma, but as map. If you see a light, don't flee. It's you. If you see a demon, don't fear. It's you. The Gnostics knew it. That is why they said, the kingdom of heaven is within you and outside you. Scientists know it. That's why they record blind people seeing during death, children describing impossible gardens, suicides welcomed with love, dead brains still active, because consciousness doesn't die. It transforms. And what you call the afterlife is just the mirror of your own inner frequency. Die with fear, you find darkness, until you remember your light. Die with love, you find light because you already were. Die with guilt, you find judgment, until you forgive yourself. Die in peace, you find peace, because you already lived in it. And here's the final revelation, the one the system never wanted you to know. You don't need to die to access the beyond, because the beyond is already here. Now, inside you, Tibetan masters trained for decades to enter the bardo, the intermediate state, while still alive. Shamans enter trance and travel spiritual realms. Sufi mystics dance until they vanish in ecstasy. Tibetan monks in Tukdam stop the body, but not consciousness. And what do they all discover? That the veil between worlds is as thin as your belief in it. Shatter the belief, and the veil dissolves, and science confirms it. Studies with deep meditation practitioners show that when the mind enters no-thought states, the brain emits gamma waves associated with enlightenment, unity, non-local perception. In those moments, meditators report, there is no longer me and the world, all is one. This isn't mysticism, it's neurotheology of unity. And the secret manuscripts of the Library of Alexandria, burned but partially recovered in fragments found in the Libyan desert in 1996, reveal that initiated priests taught, death is the final illusion. Who understands it never fears again. Who masters it never dies again. And the most shocking part, they had rituals, not to prepare for death, but to die before dying and be reborn while still alive. And if this makes you tremble, good, because it means the veil is tearing, because it means you're about to understand. Death is not the enemy, it's the portal, and what's on the other side is not a distant place. It's your own essence and expanded, free, infinite. And if you've made it this far, it wasn't by accident. It's because deep down you always knew you don't die, you transform. And what you call life is just the prologue. The true chapter begins when you stop fearing the end and embrace the eternity that was always within you. When it's all over, and when your heart stops, when your breath ceases, when the world you know disappears, what do you take with you? Money, titles, likes, houses, cars, none of that. Absolutely nothing crosses the veil. What you take, and only what you take, is the quality of your consciousness. The moments you loved without fear, the times you forgave when you could have taken revenge. The choices where you chose peace over being right, the tears you shed for another's pain, the hugs you gave with no expectation in return, the truths you spoke while trembling, the doors you opened for those trapped, the hands you held when everything collapsed. Only that is what survives. Because death doesn't take things, it takes states. And the state you cultivate here, now at this very moment, is the state you'll find there. Live with fear, you'll find darkness until you remember your light. Live with love, you'll find light, because you already were. Live with guilt, you'll find judgment until you forgive yourself. Live in peace, you'll find peace, because you already lived in it. And forbidden manuscripts confirm it. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it is written, at the moment of death, all that was repressed in life manifests. Do not flee, do not fear, recognize it is you. In the Gospel of Philip, one of the Nag Hammadi texts, it is written, whoever does not love life does not know it. Whoever knows it never fears death. And modern science confirms it. NDE survivors from all ages, cultures, and religions report the same thing. What matters is not what you did, but how you loved. A man who spent 7 minutes clinically dead after a heart attack said, "I saw my life pass, not as a movie, but as a feeling. I didn't remember the money I made. I remembered the day I hugged my son after he cried for being rejected at school. That's what saved me." A woman who died in a car crash recounted, "I saw all the times I chose pride over forgiveness, and I saw how it isolated me. But I also saw the times I chose love, and that what pulled me back." And the secret manuscripts of the Celtic Druids, found in caves in Ireland in 1911, bear a phrase carved in stone: "Death does not ask who you were, it asks who you became." And if this makes you cry, good, because it means you're understanding. You're waking up, you're realizing life is not a test, it's training. And death is not the final exam, it's graduation. And the diploma you receive isn't for heaven or hell. It's for expanded consciousness. And what the ancient sages, Egyptians, Tibetans, Gnostics, shamans, mystics knew, and what modern science is rediscovering, is that you don't need to wait for death to live this truth. You can live now, today, at this very moment, as if you've already died. As if you've already understood that nothing is yours, nothing is permanent, nothing matters except love, presence, surrender. Because when you live like that, without attachment, without fear, without mask, you're already in the beyond. You're already eternal. And death, it only confirms what you already knew. And if you've made it this far, it wasn't by accident. It's because someone deep down always knew you don't die, you transform, and what you call life is just the prologue. The true chapter, the eternal chapter, begins when you stop fearing the end and embrace here and now the eternity that was always within you. If you've made it this far, it wasn't by accident. It's because, deep down, you always knew death isn't the end. It is just the doorway to the true beginning. And what we've uncovered together across these 18 chapters isn't theory, isn't religion, isn't speculation. It's memory being reactivated. It's ancestral code being deciphered. It is your soul recognizing what it always knew, and the world tried to make you forget. You don't die, you transform, and what you call life is just training. Warm-up. Prologue. The eternal chapter begins when you stop fearing the end and embrace here and now the eternity that was always within you. Don't wait for miracles, don't wait for signs. The truth is already inside you, in your choices, in your loves, in your forgiveness, in your silent courage. Live as if you've already died, and because in a way you already have. And you were reborn, and you're being reborn, now, always. If this touched you, if it made your heart beat differently, brought tears, relief, anger, hope, then don't let it die here. Save this content. Return to it when you need to remember. You're not alone. You never were. Share it with those who need to hear it. The friend who lost someone, the child afraid of the dark, the mother who forgot her own power. Because this journey isn't just yours. It belongs to everyone who dares to face the universe's greatest mystery and discovers that deep down it was never a mystery, just a veil, and you tore it. Subscribe, not for algorithms, not out of obligation, but because this investigation doesn't end here. There are more veils to tear, more portals to open, more codes to activate. This is only the beginning of a journey far beyond what altars, laboratories, and school books show. And you, yes, you, are an essential part of it. Your presence, your yes, your silent cry, all of it moves something in the unseen realm. And we're here, walking beside you, unearthing what was buried, revealing what was silenced, weaving the veil again, not to separate but to unite. Welcome to the other side. It was waiting for you. And now, nothing will ever be the same again.